ridiculously difficult questions. Thank you very much for coming.
Okay, so we're going to get underway here. I'm going to turn things over to Dan Rowinski, who's going to be moderating the panel. And we're off and running with mobile device context. Thank you, guys.
Hi, I'm Dan Rowinski. I'm the mobile editor at ReadWrite.com. We're talking about mobile device context today, which I think there's a lot of bleed between the panel we just had and context. And we have a sort of a diverse panel here. We're going from a sort of marketing, advertising, and location technology. And sort of in this day, you know, we all have smartphones in our pocket, and these smartphones know basically everything about us. They know where we are, they know what we're doing, they know who our friends are. So this is all context, and this is context that can be acted upon by advertisers or marketers or, you know, app makers. I think Satya Nadella from Microsoft categorized this new era very well the other day. It's ubiquitous computing. Everybody has a powerful computer in their pocket. And ambient intelligence, which means context in the cloud, or context of knowing who you are and what you're doing, and then all that being computed in the cloud and then being delivered back down to the consumer. So what we're going to discuss today is, you know, what that is and how that can be acted upon by marketers and advertisers and people like yourselves in this room. So if you guys want to introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll jump into sort of what context is and how we can do it. Use it.
Sure. I'm Andy Miller, the Chief Innovation Architect at Constant Contact. Prior to Constant Contact, I actually started a company called CardStar, which is a mobile loyalty play, which was acquired by Constant Contact. That's how I made my way there. So I'm probably going to speak more today from the CardStar perspective than the Constant Contact email marketing perspective. Happy to go there if anyone wants me to, but really more germane to CardStar today.
I'm Jennifer Lum. I'm one of the co-founders of Adelphic. As you heard Michael Collins mention earlier, Adelphic has developed a mobile demand-side platform that helps brands and agencies plan and execute their mobile campaigns.
I'm Jeff Glass. I'm the CEO of Skyhook Wireless. We are a location and location intelligence company. We have a series of products that help publishers and those in mobile advertising improve the quality of their location, as well as to enhance the data and context that they can derive from location.
Okay, let's start from the sort of very basic, broad strokes here. What is mobile device context, and from each of your industry perspectives, how can it sort of be used? Let's start with Jeff.
Sure. So to me, context is, it's obviously about data, but it starts off with understanding what it is you're looking to accomplish. So I guess in the context of this room, we'll talk about how you can use data to improve advertising, but others also use context to improve the quality of a user experience and to be able to inform the content that's delivered or the actual user interface on a particular app or mobile experience. So for me, what I think people in this room should be thinking about is how do I either build or acquire relevant data around mobile experiences to help me optimize those outcomes that I'm looking to optimize, whether it be optimize the effectiveness of my advertising or optimize the effectiveness of my inventory as it relates to advertising, or just improve the user experience and metrics, performance metrics of an app that I'm deploying to consumers.
Now, you mentioned relevant data, and I think, Jen, you can speak to this fairly well. What is relevant data, and where does it come from, and how does an advertiser or a marketer, say, get a hold of it and then create a solution around it?
Sure. So in order for our platform to be effective, in order for us to allow marketers to truly engage their desired audiences in the most efficient way possible, it's our job as a platform to know the most about consumers and audiences as possible. And we do that by gathering data in the form of context from the way that users consume media on their phone, by observing and tracking the way they engage with certain types of ads and offers through our system, by understanding location patterns, time of day patterns, basically how a user uses their phone throughout the day. And that context and information is very important to us in order to create and segment audiences to connect brands to.
Andy, So this is sort of the advertising side. What is sort of the CardStar's marketing side?
So I totally agree with comments both of you made. And there was a panel
I disagree with your agreement.
You like that? There was a panel earlier today where I thought there was a point that was made that was really well made, in the sense that, I forget who was saying it, but they're talking about moments, like trying to find that moment in the user experience. And so I think it's really important. You can get, we capture a tremendous amount of data on, loyalty patterns and when you shop and where you shop and all that kind of stuff. But it's really about that moment and how do we leverage the context to serve. We don't really serve ads, but serve content or serve cards or serve information that is going to make that moment much more impactful, right, for the consumer. And if we don't do that, people won't use our app, right? They'll go someplace else to get that utility. So everything that Jeff and Jen are saying, we have to use, we have to bundle up, we have to leverage in order to create that moment, right, that's going to really be impactful and deliver for our consumers.
And I think what Andy is emphasizing is people often jump straight to the, if I have more data about the user, then I can do better audience buying and I can target and get higher CPMs or better effectiveness. But if you're not first using that data to enhance the experience for the consumer, to engage the consumer, to create that value proposition for the end user, then A, that inventory doesn't exist, and B, you have a disengaged consumer, so it doesn't matter what you put on those ads, people aren't really paying attention. So I do think that the building block of having effective advertising is first having an effective consumer experience.
Right, and I really want to dive into this user experience. We talk about experience and moments, but practically, what does that look like? So, I mean, I have my smartphone in my hand, I'm wandering down the street, or I'm surfing through apps or the internet, whatever I'm doing. What is the practical application? How are we taking this context, what we know about these people, and delivering it? I mean, is it a push notification? Is it an ad? And then we'll get into sort of maybe how intrusive that could be and where that line is.
So I'll give you we've tried a whole bunch of things. So CardStar's been around for almost 5 years. We tried doing everything from remember when iPhone first came out, the little red bubbles, the little badges that told you like how many emails you had. We tried doing that just to show you how many offers you had for a loyalty card, which you put into the application. And people just went crazy, right? So we said, okay, that's too intrusive. We didn't think that was going to be the case. Therefore, we then said, well, if we try and do push notification, that's really going to be intrusive. If they don't like the little red bubble that just sort of shows up. So we backed off of that. What we do now is we leverage location as a primary driver to know when to serve something. And it's not a in-your-face serving. It is, hey, you're shopping. You open the application, we're going to leverage location to kind of filter or sort and bring to the top what we believe to be the most relevant content based on your location. The content itself goes through other filters, right? So what's the most appropriate ad or piece of content to serve you relative to any given merchant is sort of a secondary concern for us. So we've tried to do it in a way that it's all baked into the experience and we're not pushing anything in your face. And you're only engaging with our content at the right time, at the right place. And
this is through, say, an app experience.
Correct.
Right. How are we deploying content?
Sure. So at Adelphic, our moment to engage a consumer is really through their consumption of media. And so that could be through a mobile website or a mobile app. And the ads that we deliver down to them are in the format of display ads, video ads, native ads. Like Andy mentioned, we also go through a pretty rigorous evaluation process for each individual user that hits our platform to determine if we have an ad that we think is highly relevant and has high probability of engaging a user with a given brand.
So we're a technology service provider, so we don't have our own applications or direct-to-consumer or enterprise apps. So we power a lot. So we do get to see a lot of different use cases for this. And I think I would describe this, a lot of people think of the obvious aspects of when they think about location and context, they think about the sort of first order of magnitude, which is, okay, I'm in a particular place, somehow my device or my app knows that I'm in that place, and now I'm going to serve up something relevant based on that. And that's great, and we see lots of use cases for that. And some of them are like Andy's examples, where he's a loyalty card provider to tens of thousands of merchants, both big box as well as long tail. And so being able to have that right loyalty card pop up in your mobile wallet and then be able to get relevant content when you're in that store or in that merchant, that's an incredibly great use case for a consumer and a great way to add value. And then the advertising and monetization just falls from that, but it starts with a great user experience. But I would consider that kind of the direct example. I'm in a place, and that place is geofenced somehow, and therefore I get something when I'm entering or exiting that geofence. And there's lots of great examples. Andy's a great example. There's clients of ours are using it to differentiate the user experience when they know that they're in a work environment versus a home environment, or when they're traveling internationally versus when they're domestic. So there's all kinds of things just based on the physical location that you could do at the time of understanding that location. The second piece of it, which I think is perhaps even more interesting, is what I think of as secondary, which is it's not so much someone wants to hit up the user with a particular transaction or experience right now because of where they are. It's understanding the context of that location and the patterns of those locations and what you can derive about that user anonymously, but still derive kind of the insights about the persona behind that person or the segments that they fall into that then can inform all sorts of experiences around what content you provide, what advertising ultimately gets delivered, et cetera. And it's not necessarily pointed to right now based on your specific location at this exact time.
Right, and I was going to jump into this maybe a little later, but it seems like it's sort of coming up. It's this notion of privacy, as the commenter from the last panel asked. We talk about consumer behavior and knowing things about them. How much is too much, and where's the line? I know that there's sort of the regulations and the ad councils like guide on this, and most companies will abide by that. But how much is creepy, and how much is just enough to deliver actionable, useful information to people from both like the marketing side and the consumer side? Andy?
So when we started the company, we purposely didn't ask for any PII. You could just put your cards in there. We didn't ask for email. We didn't have to set up an account. Didn't have to do anything. That was a big differentiator for us early on. It's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing, though, right? So what we had happening is people would lose their phone, and cards weren't backed up, and they threw their cards out. And I have no way to recover that. So the only way for us to do anything, cloud backup or whatnot, is to have an account. So we did a optional account, and we have about a little over 4 million users. About 100,000 people opted into that. After acquisition, we made it mandatory. We rolled out a new version. You have to give us an email and a username. And we rolled out an entire new version of the application, actually in like October. A small group, but a very vocal group, went nuts, right? You're working with the NSA, you're passing my data. Like, no, we're not, and we're not passing data to anyone, but it is a big concern. People are getting, it's loyalty cards, but reality is people are dumping their wallets into our application, so they're putting credit cards and healthcare cards and driver's license and personal pieces of information that we're not asking for, but they're just using it as a digital vault. So the interesting thing is we actually took a stronger stance of we have to protect this data even more than we were before. The downside is we know we're going to piss off a lot of people, and we're going to probably see attrition go way up. And we didn't, interestingly enough. We still have that small group of people that are very vocal about privacy, but we don't spam people. We don't hit them up inside the app. Everything we push to them is highly relevant. And we're a little different because it's sort of a self-selecting thing, right? You put your own loyalty cards in, or things from your wallet. So when you get things sent to you or pushed to you through the application, it's all highly relevant just on that in and of itself. And so privacy has not been a huge issue outside of, again, a small group of folks that are conspiracy theorists, I'll call it, that think we're colluding with the NSA to provide every piece of information that you can imagine on shopping behaviors.
Well, I mean, there's definitely an aspect here. I mean, we keep on seeing over and over again, like Target gets hacked. We have Heartbleed, which is sort of the big story on the internet right now. You know, there's sort of this consumer mindset right now that, you know, these people have my information and they can basically do whatever they want with it. And nobody trusts anything on the internet. You know, you see a lot more of these people sort of like saying, I'm not going to have a smartphone, I'm not going to go on the internet. Small percentage and vocal.
Yeah.
But it comes down to a matter of trust, and each individual company and brand has to garner that trust. Jen, how does that trust happen, and how can you be transparent about it?
Well, I think one of the panelists in the previous panel mentioned the importance of consumer notification. Because we are not wholly in control of the consumer experience as we're engaging with users in mobile, a lot of that notification and sort of upfront statement to users, we have to rely on our content partners to do. So basically, anytime we interact with a consumer, it's really in partnership with a mobile website owner or a mobile application owner. We do our part by, for any behaviorally targeted ads that we deliver through our system, we do comply with DAA regulations around delivering that little consumer ad choices icon. We also, as a policy, do not store any personally identifiable information in our platform. However, we are partnered with many third-party data platforms that are structuring, storing first-party CRM data. I think ultimately as an ad platform, it's our job to deliver the most highly targeted, relevant offers to consumers as possible, and the goal is to get to true one-to-one marketing. But there is a responsibility that we have as an ad tech industry to make sure that we are mindful of consumer privacy concerns and we're not overstepping our bounds in any way, and that when we are handling sensitive consumer information, we're doing so in a very secure manner.
So I think we can hammer on the privacy paranoia aspect for a while, but I want to segue sort of away from that and get to something a little bit more actionable. So the last panel was talking about who I'm now in my mind is starting to think about the mythical CMO of McDonald's. So who's using context and who should use context? So I mean, we're at Fidelity right now, and it seems like, is context a good sort of delivery and mechanism or just a concept for a place like Fidelity, or is it something that's more attuned to like retailers, like the CMO of McDonald's? So who is sort of this context-based approach good for? And start with Jeff, because Jeff, you probably see this entire spectrum.
Yeah, we see a lot. The low-hanging fruit is for anyone who has a physical retail presence. You can do a lot with attribution. So if you have a mobile app and you're a retailer and you've been doing advertising, you can start to figure out whether a higher percentage of people who've seen your advertising are actually walking into your actual brick and mortar stores. If you're really clever, you can also somehow tie that together, and that's complicated to some of what you're seeing back online. So you can start to bring together the physical world to the digital world, and mobile being that bridge. So I think that for those that have physical presence, and you don't have to be a retailer, right? I mean, we see auto dealers and we see big box retailers and QSR doing a lot of stuff that's interesting in there. But also we see folks that are sports stadiums and and there's applications that are in education and college environments and healthcare and hospitals. So without question, there's some really low-hanging, interesting fruit if you've got a physical presence. But I would say, even if you don't, if you are someone who spends a lot of money trying to optimize a user experience on mobile, or frankly even off mobile, because some of the insights that you can learn about a user could be brought to other non-mobile channels. But if you're someone who spends a lot of time wanting to understand the user to optimize the experience on or off mobile, or if you're spending a lot of time trying to understand profiles and audiences so that you can better optimize advertising, then you don't necessarily have to be a brick and mortar retailer in order to take advantage of the data that you can extract and the context that you can build around users.
Jen, from the advertising's perspective, I mean, what do you see? Is it sort of the low-hanging fruit, or how far down the spectrum does it go?
So we've seen demand for location data grow very rapidly, I'd say over the past 6 to 9 months. And it really does span from brick and mortar retailers trying to drive people in store to point of purchase, to people trying to, I think, build audience segments based around location patterns and location profiles of real life consumer behavior. So for example, if we set up geofences around baseball stadiums, for example, let's say we set up a geofence around Fenway Park, and we see n number of users who hit that geofence 3 times in 2 months, there's probably a pretty good chance that they're a diehard Red Sox fan. And that's an opportunity to monetize that audience by selling that to a brand. We also see a lot of competitive conquesting. So it could be Honda who decides that they want to define their in-market audience as a group of people who are seen within an auto dealership's parking lot 2 times over the past 2 months. So let's drop those geofences nationally around Toyota's dealerships and sell that to Honda.
No, Andy, this is pretty much like sort of in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I think everyone should use it. I don't think there's anyone that shouldn't use it. To me, context delivers better customer journeys, better customer experiences, and the better you can know, like Jen's talking about and Jeff's talking about, like the more you can understand, like the predictive analytics, the actionable insight, that all drives consumer experience. It all drives the consumer journeys we're trying to create, and it just makes them that much better. And whatever that journey is, whatever the experience is, you want to optimize it, period. Right? And often the best journeys or experiences are the simplest, but most of the time the simplest are the hardest to get to. And without the context and all this information and data, it's really hard to get there.
Let me give you a couple of less obvious examples. I was thinking about some work that our data team had done. So we did some work around college campuses. And so at first you might kind of simply say, okay, well, I get the demographics around college campuses, and so what do I need to understand context for? But what our team was able to do, if you look at college campuses, is actually show the statistical differences between the population on college campuses between 9 to 5 and after hours. And when you look at it, what you see is that the demographics actually get much lower after hours, which of course is very intuitive, right? It makes sense, which is after hours, all the paid faculty and professors and teaching staff and folks who have jobs, they actually leave. And then what's left is the younger demographic that are starving college students. And so that's a contextual insight that you can make using location and location-derived information. If you look at a map of the country and sort of overlay these kinds of insights, you can start to see areas where the census, basic census data says, oh, this is a lower income, X demographic, psychographic, income profile. But yet, when you actually provide location-derived context and information, you could see all these pockets, these little oases of really high upper income demographics. And when you double or triple click down, what you see is in some little town in the Midwest that has really lower income demographics, in the middle of all that is this amazingly high demographic. You triple click and what you figure out is it's a hospital medical facility, and all around there are doctors and nurses and high-end medical personnel. So there's really incredible insights that you can derive using location and location-derived information, not just about users, but about physical places to help inform user experiences, advertising spend, et cetera. And in a lot of cases, what you learn is that the basic census data that most people in advertising have learned to sort of rely upon is really very, very coarse, and we could do a lot better.
So segueing a little bit, so there's an elephant in the room sort of in this conversation, right? And it kind of
I think that's a rude way to talk about Jen. I mean, she's sitting right here.
Really does. All right, so but from a consumer perspective, we see basically, well, these are the biggest names in technology. These are the kings of context right now. We've got, Facebook knows everything about you. Google knows everything about you, and through your smartphone too. Everybody's got, Google one way or another on their phone tracking them. Facebook, everybody, when the quarterly earnings came out, Facebook has 1 billion mobile users. Twitter is working on app installs and their card product. If I'm in this room and I'm thinking of, working on a contextual-based program, I can very easily go through, Google, what's their mobile ad called? Anyway, iAds with Google. Facebook is also going into programmatic.
Apple. iAds is Apple.
Yeah, iAds is Apple. So what, how does this group handle being the third party when these kings of context are trying to gobble up everything? Start with Andy.
So I've been less concerned about Google and Facebook. I've been more concerned about guys like CVS and Best Buy, right? Because they have a tremendous amount of data as well, right? And specifically as CardStar's focusing on our consumer base. But I think there's sources for information to the extent that you can get information from Facebook. Like I had an idea 2 or 3 years ago when the social graph was everything, right? Oh, with the social graph, and you can grab the social graph and learn all this great stuff. So, well, I'm going to create something called a loyalty graph, and I'm going to go grab the social graph for each person I have and marry that to the loyalty graph, and I've got some really rich data, right? That I can use those sources to augment. I think everybody has data. I mean, companies like Localytics or even Skyhook, you guys have tremendous amounts of data because you're across every application on every device. And Facebook's not, right? Google maybe. So I think there's just I'm just less concerned about personally, and through CardStar, less concerned about how much data is sitting on all these other platforms because data is everywhere, in huge amounts of data. Right?
Now, Jeff and Jen, you actually have probably a more personal experience here. Skyhook through sort of an obvious reason going back to the sort of birth of Android, and Jen going back to Quattro, going to Apple. So how do you work either with these kings of context or sort of battle against them?
Well, Skyhook has 2 pieces to our business. On the one side, we have invented over a decade ago, we kind of pioneered Wi-Fi-based location and the ability to integrate or hybridize Wi-Fi with GPS and cell tower data to provide really accurate location. And so there's a side of our business where the big device makers and the OS companies, they're our customers. And that's, we license our technology out to them. So when I'm on that side, I love those guys. On the other side, on this contextual side of our business, clearly those guys, Google and Apple and others have a tremendous amount of data. Much of that is being used for their own advertising purposes. Mm-hmm. So the way we think about our technology and our data and analytics and our ability to offer the things that we do, I don't want to make it a Skyhook commercial, is that we think about trying to provide as a service all of those capabilities that a Google would have internally. We try to build those, because we have such hardcore technology understanding of location, we try to expose all of that as a service to anyone who wishes that they could have the kind of capabilities that a Google would have and make that available for the world to use for their own benefit as opposed to the platforms who use it for their own benefit.
Jen, do you want to get on this topic, or do you want to pass?
Sure. No, I think it's a big question. So as Jeff mentioned, one of the primary objectives of these major platform players in collecting and gathering all of this consumer data, which is very impressive and is at very large scale, is to drive advertising directly on their platforms. Our objective as a company and as an advertising platform is to provide access to as many consumers as possible cross-platform. Wherever possible, we would love to partner with each of these giants such as Apple, Google, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, to get to as much verified consumer data as possible, but those aren't the only sources of data. So there are other means of accessing not only consumer profile data, but also purchase data, behavioral data, and it's our job to understand how to identify those sources and bring them into our platform to build the most robust profiles possible. But on top of that, we believe that one of the biggest ways of influencing real-time consumer behavior is based on the real-time data, interaction data that a user is exhibiting in session. And we have full access to that data based on how users hit our platform. And what we've seen is that it is critically important to have data on a user, but as Jeff mentioned earlier, what's the most important is understanding which pieces of data to leverage in real time to successfully drive consumer interaction.
Right. So we have just a couple minutes left before we go to a couple questions, right? And so the last thing, not your company or your panelist companies, who is using context well? Andy?
Aside from the big guys, right, because they do it very well, there's a company called Localytics here in town that's actually doing something I think pretty interesting. So Localytics powers, they're a mobile app analytics data company. And a lot of companies are doing this, but this whole retargeting, and because they're across so many, I think they're on like 1 billion devices now or something, their ability to retarget based on content they're seeing anonymously in all their apps, I think it's really pretty interesting and powerful.
So I think Apple is laying the groundwork to not only enable themselves, but third-party companies to take advantage of a lot of great contextual data that's being generated from both mobile devices and also their iBeacon product. I think one product that is actually ready in market today that's great is Google's Now. That is taking advantage of data that they're getting from your Gmail, data that they're taking from your devices, and presenting you with real-time updates that I actually find delightful and very helpful as a consumer.
Jeff?
Rather than add another name to the list, because I don't want to talk about our customers without permission, I just wanted to make one other quick point on your last question, which is, I think for those who are really serious about this, who think that location and understanding not just the where, but understanding what you can about the who and the what and the why of someone is in a certain place or who they are or what they're about, I think to the extent that you feel like that can transform your user experience or your advertising monetization, you really need to think about building up your own first-order, first-party data. If you've got an audience, then you have the opportunity to build this data and to build these analytics and to use it for your own advantage. And so back to this platform question, I think there are ways that people don't have to necessarily be beholden to the big OS platforms, but can build their own capabilities to create their own differentiation.
Okay. We'll go to questions now. Anybody from the audience?
She does not have one.
What's next in content? You talked a lot about location, day, or behavioral patterns. But we're getting into an age of fitness trackers and Google Glass. What's the next signal that marketers have?
Well, I mean, my quick 2 cents is that we're seeing Internet of Things, we're seeing wearables, we're seeing this. This is great sources of information for context. How do people, what's next there?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of the gesture-based data signals that are starting to be generated from wearable devices, even Apple's iPhone, the new iPhone has the sensor chip in it. It adds another dimension or another layer of context to which we can add to our understanding of consumers. So maybe prior to being able to add on the gesture-based layer of data to a consumer profile, maybe we knew that a consumer was at Starbucks in the morning, and then we saw them at home. What we didn't know was maybe they jogged home. And so maybe that makes them more qualified for a certain type of product than another.
I had a little bit more of a technical answer or approach to that, which is, I think there's some very interesting things going on right now, both by the at all layers of the mobile stack, from the software guys to the OS level guys to the chip makers themselves, that are thinking about how do you furnish, what's sometimes called ambient location or always on location. And the challenge, as we talked about in this panel, if you can, location is a pathway to understanding so much more than just physically where is somebody right now. It can build this whole profile and persona about a user and about a place and connect the offline and the online. So it's really powerful. But the biggest challenge, or one of the technical challenges to it, is that if you were always asking a device for its location, it can be really painful on the battery life and the consumer experience. And so there's a lot of technology and a lot of R&D and a lot of collaboration going on to say, how do you create ambient location so that you can always inform application use cases and advertising based on the merits and data around location?
More questions? Anybody?
I think we're going to wrap it up there. Can we get a round of applause for the panelists?